Hello, my name is Dr. Kevin Inston. I'm a member of the French department in the School of European Languages, Culture and Society, known as SELCS. I'm going to talk to you today about an aspect of my research and one of my areas of interest, and that is French philosophy. And I'm going to do that by looking at a French philosopher called Jacques Rancière, about whom I've written articles. Why should you be interested in Jacques Rancière? Well, Jacques Rancière is interesting for his idea of equality. And he looks at a fundamental question, which is, how do those who have been treated unequally, how do those who've been marginalised by their societies or excluded or denied rights make themselves count as equals? And he gives us examples such as women, migrant workers, blacks, slaves, workers in general, who've often occupied the position of inequality, who've occupied a position of oppression in society. And he's interested in how they demonstrate to others that it was wrong to have treated them unequally. What's his answer to this question? Well, his answer looks quite simple. It's that they have to begin acting as equals, irrespective of whether their society recognises their equality or not, because it's only by acting as an equal that they can get themselves seen and heard as equals and prove to others that they should never have treated them as unequals, should never have oppressed, excluded or marginalised them. In order to understand his theory of equality, we're going to look at an example. It's the example of Olympe de Gouges. Olympe de Gouges was writing in the 18th century, and she could be understood as an early French feminist. Why? Because she was struggling for the rights of women, for the freedom and equality of women, their right to participate in politics more particularly. Now, why is this significant? Well, we have to understand something about the context in which Olympe de Gouges was writing and also in which she was acting as a feminist. Feminism was not established as a movement at that time. Women were still considered to be by and large the property of men. They either belonged to their husbands or they belonged to their fathers. They didn't really have much of a role in the public sphere. In fact, they were thought to only belong in the private sphere, where they could either be daughters or mothers who raised children. Now, there was another important aspect to Olympe de Gouges' context. She was writing in revolutionary France. And what the revolutionaries had just established was la Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen. The declaration is significant. Why? Well, it was the first time that ordinary individuals had grouped together to decide on what were the rights that all citizens should have by dint of being human beings. What should they expect from the societies in which they lived? What should they expect from the governments that they elected? Now, one of the radical ideas that emerged from the Declaration was the idea that everyone, by virtue of being a human being, was born free and equal. The idea of universal freedom and equality. And once you've declared freedom and equality as something that's universal, then particular forms of inequality or oppression become illegitimate, become something that you can dispute. Now, you might think that universal equality meant that it applied to everyone, that universal freedom applied to everyone. But the revolutionaries didn't see it that way. The revolutionaries decided that freedom and equality should be limited to a section of the population, to white males who owned property and who were above the age of 25. And this is where the action of Olympe de Gouges comes in. Why? Well, she'd understood what universal equality meant. It meant that if it's universal, it can't exclude women, that it has to apply to women and to all groups of human beings. So how did she go about disputing the decision of the revolutionaries and their attempt to restrict equality and freedom to men over a certain age and who were propertied? Well, she decided that she would write her own declaration, called La Déclaration des droits de la femme et de la citoyenne. Now, her declaration imitated the original, but it did something important. It replaced the word l'homme with femme and the word citoyen, citizen, with the word la citoyenne, female citizen, to show that all of the articles that were legally enshrined applied to women just as much as they applied to men. So she decided that she would, in fact, show that the original declaration actually already included women. Because if freedom and equality was something that was universal, then it couldn't actually exclude women. It couldn't actually limit rights to a certain group of individuals. But more than that, she seized her right as a free and equal individual to question the decision of the revolutionaries, to question their authority. She seized the right to participate in the public sphere and engage in a debate about what freedom and equality meant, who it applied to, and what universal meant. She showed that she didn't need to wait for the authorities to grant her equality. She didn't need to wait for the authorities to give her human rights. She already had those rights because she was a human being, and she was going to exercise them by, in fact, writing her own declaration and by participating in the public sphere. She demonstrated her capacity for political thought, her capacity for equality. And she thereby proved that it was wrong to have, in fact, excluded women from the declaration, to think that they were only capable of rearing children or only capable of occupying a place in the private sphere. Women could act as political equals to men and, in fact, could understand the declaration perfectly well, because she understood what universality meant. So what should we conclude from this example, and more broadly from Jacques Rancière's thought? Well, first of all, we can understand that equality is not something that's granted to individuals. If equality is something that can be granted to individuals, if you can decide whether someone should be treated as equal or not, you're in fact retaining a power relation. You're creating a hierarchy where one person has the power to decide whether someone should be granted rights, should be seen as an equal or not. So it shows that equality has to be considered as something that is active, something that you demonstrate to others through your actions, as Olympe de Gouges did, by writing her own declaration and by participating in the public sphere before her equality had been officially recognised. And in that way, you managed to get yourself seen and heard as an equal. You managed to demonstrate to others the wrong of treating you in a way that marginalised you, excluded you, or denied you rights. So for Rancière, equality is something that's active, it has to be demonstrated, it has to be produced through actions, and it cannot be a passive state where someone else can decide for you whether you're equal or not. I hope you've enjoyed my short taster session and I hope to see some of you in the near future. Many thanks for listening. Dr. Kevin Inston.